The last couple of weeks, we've been talking a little bit more about fullness, specifically how fullness exists on a spectrum for all of us, and that it's our job as intuitive eaters to become familiar with our own sweet spot of hunger in order to have the most enjoyable, present, mindful eating experience. And then we also talked about structured eating as one strategy to invite out hunger signals and also not to get too hungry, to not go longer than, say, 3.5, 4 hours without eating. This week, we're connecting the dots between hunger and fullness. A lot of people come to intuitive eating because they struggle with fullness. They don't know why they constantly find themselves eating beyond a comfortable point of fullness and feel disoriented and confused and frustrated and ashamed, sometimes guilty a lot of the time. So it's a big issue that I want to normalize for you, and also to invite you to start to look at fullness in the context of hunger. And that's for a couple of different reasons. Just like hunger has a physiologic explanation, and food looks more appealing to us as our bodies need energy, so that compels us to pursue food. The body starts to send signals that tell us we're becoming satisfied, we're getting full. And those are both experiential, internal signals, and the sort of physical sensory signals of, for example, the belly stretching, feeling, your waistband getting a little tighter, that type of thing. So one of the reasons that we try to find the sweet spot of hunger and try to start eating at that point as much as possible is because one part of it is that it allows us to be present with the eating and to notice as fullness starts to emerge, because just like hunger, fullness emerges slowly. But our perception of hunger and fullness can be different because as dieters, we were always trying to manage hunger and to minimize the amount of food we were eating. So in many cases, people focus more on like, how much should I be eating rather than how can I listen to my body to tell me when I'm done? And when you start eating at that sweet spot of hunger, you're much more likely to notice and interpret accurately and respond to the signals of fullness as it emerges. And as you're working with the psychology of intuitive eating, also understand like, okay, I know as an eating experience comes to an end, it can be kind of sad. And because I have this history of dieting where I was always feeling like I always wanted to eat and never wanted to stop, it can feel more challenging to work with fullness than with hunger. So that's just important to understand both on a physical level, a psychological level. It also speaks to the fact that if you're at the point in your intuitive eating practice where you would like to focus on fullness a little bit more, it's really important to make sure you're not getting too hungry. Right? It's not the way I think of it is that it's not really a reasonable ask, to stop at comfortable fullness if you're starting when you're ravenous or you don't have the consistent habit of eating regularly. And so, your hunger level might be at different levels at different times, and you're not paying attention in that way, so you don't have a concept of it. Fullness is just notoriously more difficult for some of those reasons, right? If you're always approaching eating with the idea that you should be eating as little as possible, you should stop eating as soon as possible, then initially you might have the feeling like, I want to eat as much as I can as an intuitive eater. If I have this unconditional permission to eat, I want to use it. And I want to eat a quantity of food. Eventually, when you reinforce that permission and you reinforce starting to eat at your sweet spot of hunger, some more subtle awareness can emerge in which you can start to understand and appreciate that stopping eating at a comfortable point of fullness, whatever that means to you. And there might be variations. Some people like to eat to a slightly lesser degree of fullness. Other people like to feel that fullness a little more strongly. Whether you like to eat to a lesser degree of fullness or a greater degree of fullness, you might start to notice that whatever your point of enough is, overshooting it would actually take away from your pleasure. And if that doesn't make sense to you just yet, don't worry about it. It's fine. It will make sense eventually when you get there. That's the importance of both having this external information of like the milestones to look for, but also really stay committed to being where you are, working with your own particular edge. But you might start to notice that you might start to develop that awareness that if I were to continue eating, even though it seems like on one level that would give me more pleasure, bypassing comfortable fullness and eating to the point of uncomfortable fullness actually starts to take away from my sense of satisfaction and pleasure from eating. And I think that's a key moment to know exists and to start to pay attention to if you have laid the foundation so far. And there are many things that need to come before fullness, and that's why we talk about hunger and letting go of diet mentality and meeting your basic physical needs like getting enough sleep and water and stress reduction and all those things. So if you are at that point of wanting to look more closely at comfortable fullness, and how do I start to more consistently stop at that point, notice it, recognize it, do the physical and emotional work that's, momentary in order to stop at that point, then you might be interested in a group that I have coming up. And it's about recognizing and respecting comfortable fullness. And in this group, we're going to do a deeper dive into this by setting the foundation for this and reinforcing eating regularly and meeting the basic physiologic needs, understanding the emotions that come up when working with fullness, and ultimately recognizing how stopping a comfortable fullness can actually heighten pleasure. Doesn't mean that you're going to be happy at the end of a meal, something delicious that you're eating comes to an end. You might still be bummed out, but having that awareness that you'll eat again when it's satisfying again, when it's, rewarding again, and that in a way you're practicing self-care by stopping at this point, not because you should, but because you choose to, because you've had a variety of experiences that tell you that stopping at this point contributes to the most pleasurable overall eating experience. So all of the information about this comfortable fullness group is below in your newsletter. Please reach out if you have any questions. And for the next week, perhaps try to make connections between the degree of fullness at which you are stopping at and whether you're starting at that sweet spot of hunger. Also notice if you have specific preferences for eating to a greater degree of fullness or a lesser degree of fullness, right? If you eat to a greater degree of fullness, you might eat larger, less frequent meals throughout the day. If you tend to eat to a lesser degree of fullness, you might have a tendency to eat more frequently throughout the day, right? So the important part of this is to make the connections that are relevant to you, and always to have this framework so that when there are variations in your experience, it makes sense. You can contextualize it, you can normalize it, you can offer yourself self-compassion if it's a difficult experience, and you can consider all of it as like data that are going into the library of your self-literacy. So let me know what you think. And I'm always interested in hearing your experiences, especially in working with fullness, because it can be so dicey. And I'll see you next time.